everyone. Welcome to Books Between Bites for December 2024. My name is Kristen, and I am one of the librarians here at Batavia Public Library. Becky Hogue is usually the one to welcome you and introduce the speaker. Unfortunately, she could not be here today. I want to thank Barb for recording today's presentation, which will be made available on BATV's YouTube channel, along with previous episodes of Books Between Bites. Now, next month, we will have 2 Books Between Bites opportunities for you. On January 16th, Carl Brun will be here to talk about the fascinating stories of the unique structures in the Fabian Forest Preserve, where he is a docent. And on January 30th, Marnie Memminga and Mary C. Parks will be presenting their new book, The Wolf Song in Me, and Mary will demonstrate the torn paper technique she used to create the illustrations. And now, today's speaker, Valerie Blaine, is a lifelong naturalist. Although retired from Kane County Forest Preserve District, she spends almost as much time in the forest preserves as a volunteer as she did as an employee. She's a steward at Tekowit Woods Forest Preserve, leading volunteer habit restoration work days, and she's a bee monitor and a fungus monitor for the district. Other ways she fills her time are wood carving, studying French, hunting with her husband and dogs, traveling, and, not least, spending time with her granddaughter. Today she will be talking about Paul Bogard's book, The End of Night, Searching for Natural Darkness in a World of Artificial Light. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, to be back here. I've given Books Between Bites presentations before, and I always enjoy the venue and the people here. Well, as you probably have noticed, the nights are growing long as we approach the winter solstice. Sunrise was 7:09 this morning, and the sun's going to sink beneath the horizon at 4:19 p.m. So it seems like a good time of year to talk about a book about darkness. And as Kristen mentioned, our book today is The End of Night by Paul Bogard, Searching for Natural Darkness in an Age of Artificial Light. It's available at several of the partner libraries here, so you can get it through interlibrary loan. It was published in 2013, and much of what Bogard writes has been actually expanded upon since its publication. I'm going to hit the highlights today, including the role of darkness in our cultural and natural history, the importance of natural darkness for our health and for the planet's health. We'll look at some of the effects of interrupting natural dark and light cycles. And finally, inspired by Bogard's narrative, we'll look at steps we can take to preserve natural darkness. Oops, sorry. There we go. So the nights may be getting longer, but they're not getting darker. There you go. It's all based on a huge change in history that has occurred. And we once lived in a time when there was natural darkness at night and light in the daytime, but that's been really changed, turned around. In fact, it's not getting darker at night. It's the opposite is happening. We're going to take a look at why that is the case. Bogard's book is sort of a travelogue. It's part It's a lyrical book. It's part travelogue and it's scientific, all rolled together. He literally traveled the globe to research how cultures interact with nighttime and darkness. And of course, he started in his chapter, Tales from Two Cities. You'll never guess what two cities he started in. Paris, of course, and London. In Paris, he interviewed people and he looked at some of the old parts of the city and went back into history to see how that city functioned at night. Now, I just happen to have read, this is a retirement thing, I finally had time to read Les Miserables, which is a long one. And I was really struck with how Victor Hugo described Paris at night. Imagine any big city like Chicago before electric lights. What would you do at night when it got dark? Well, people didn't go out very much. And the night skies and the night buildings were completely different. Bogart goes into this quite a bit, as did Victor Hugo. And then in London, he talks about the history of lighting in London. And it turns out that gas lighting, well, let me back up a step. In Paris, King Louis XIV was the first one that we know about to decree that there be light in public places. In Paris, how would you do that? King Louis XIV reigned in the 1600s. That was well before electricity. So his bright idea, pun intended, was to hang lanterns with candles around the city. So this was a royal decree. So somebody had to go light all those candles throughout the city of Paris. And as you can probably imagine, they didn't really produce a whole lot of light. It wasn't until the invention of gas lights that street lighting kind of really took hold, both in Paris and in London and some of the other major cities. Gaslight was the form of lighting that they had. And there are all kinds of stories about the people that had to climb up on ladders and all the accidents that happened as people were climbing up on ladders, illuminating the gas lights. And it was in the early 1800s that gas lighting came to, not the kind of gas lighting we talk about today, but the lighting of gas lamps came to the big cities in Europe. But in 1879, something happened that would change really the whole world. What happened, do you think, in 1879? Thomas Edison patented the first incandescent electric light bulb. He wasn't the only one. There were a lot of people working on it, but he was the one that patented it and perfected it. This was a profound change for human society. We often don't think about it very much, but our entire lifestyles could change. People could work after dark. People could play after dark. You could perform surgery at midnight. It really changed how humans behave. So that Paris of old now looks like this at night. This was the opening ceremony of the Olympics last summer. The City of Lights, indeed a city of lights. And London is well known for its brightly illuminated buildings at night as well. So gone are the old days of dark and poorly lit cities. Well, poorly lit, I guess we can still have poorly lit cities, but in a different way. In this image of the continental United States, you can see at night that there's really quite a lot of light after sunset. This graphic is pretty poignant. It shows the change in brightness due to light pollution across the recent decades. I was born in 1954, and I remember as a little kid, my family took a train trip from Chicago to Los Angeles. We happened to be going through Arizona when it was nighttime, and my dad called me up to let me go into the dome car. Anybody remember the dome cars on those old trains where all the adults were drinking cocktails and smoking cigarettes? But I got to go up there because my dad wanted to show me the incredible night sky in Arizona at night, and it just blew me away. I mean, I was 4 years old and I remember it to this day. I had never seen, and I don't think I've seen since, a night sky like that. It's still kind of dark in Arizona, but certainly not the way it was in the 50s. And here in the Chicago area, look at how much it changed from the late 50s to the mid 70s, 1997, and projected for 2025. I think we've already met that projection. You'd be hard pressed to see the Milky Way anywhere near a big city. So, let's see here. The average night sky, in fact, got brighter by 9.6% each year from 2011 to 2022, which another way of saying that is that sky brightness is doubling every 8 years. So, what's a big deal? Bogart asks this question in the book. What does it matter? So we've got a lot more light today. Well, one of the ways that it matters is rhythm, as in we've thrown off natural rhythms, natural cycles. And the kind of rhythm in specific, we've all got rhythm, is circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is the natural shift from darkness to daylight and back again, day after day, month after month. It's something, circadian rhythm is a rhythm that's been going on for like 4 billion some years. Every organism on the planet evolved with circadian rhythm. From elephants to little phytoplankton. We all have in our genetic background the instinct for darkness after sunset and light after the sun rises. Circadian rhythm it permeates the natural world. But the problem is that we've interrupted that rhythm with all of our artificial lights. So this is what's called light pollution. And what light pollution fundamentally is the brightening of the night sky caused by man-made light sources. If you look on horizons, you can definitely see this. This is from Arizona. You can see the glow of Tucson in the major cities. And then, of course, prisons are a big source of lights. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Just a picture a little closer to home. This is an image created from satellite data in 2017. The pinkish yellow represents extreme light pollution, and the purplish gray is minimal light pollution. Well, there we are, right in the purplish zone. And since this was compiled in 2017, I would venture to guess that the purple has extended a little farther west now in 2024. The light pollution is so great that about 99% of the population in North America and Europe lives under light polluted skies. And a great example of this was given by my friend Pam Otto, who was leading a night program at Hickory Knolls in St. Charles. Pam and I used to lead nighttime insect programs at this site as well, and it was really dark. Well, she had this program for looking for owls, and to her surprise, she had been, out in this area a lot at night, but to her surprise, when she showed up to give the program, it was lit. It was very well lit. The neighbors, the adjacent property of Hickory Knolls Natural Area is the state, boys' home, juvenile detention facility. And they had just put up these huge, bright, new white lights. Well, that's fine on the prison grounds, maybe, but the problem is that it flooded the natural area, and those lights flood the natural area as well. There's no owl that's going to be flying out there in those spotlights. And you can see it was so bright that there are people who are avoiding looking at it. This is a circus that has come to town in St. Charles in May. Tremendously lit. It's like you can see this for miles down Randall Road. These are examples of light pollution. There's a way to measure light pollution, and Bogart gets into this in his book. One measure of light pollution is a number on the Bortle scale. The Bortle scale is a measure of darkness in the night sky. It goes from 1 to 9. I don't know what happened to 10, but from 1 being an excellent dark sky and 9 being totally washed out a city sky. You can look this up online. You can just Google Bortle scale and then the town or city where you live. If you live in St. Charles, I'll save you some time and tell you we are a 7. We can see some stars, but not very many. Many of the constellations are not visible to us. The different components of light pollution are sky glow, light trespass. This is when your neighbor's light ends up in your bedroom and you're not, whether you want it or not. And glare. Oops, let me go back. So in terms of sky glow, if you go out in your backyard and you look towards the east, you will see sky glow, guaranteed, any night of the year. The city of Chicago just glows on the horizon, but it's also from our suburbs as well. In terms of sky glow, a recent article in The Atlantic says that sky glow can render a city 5 times brighter than it would be under natural conditions. On an overcast night, when the light reflects off both the ground and the clouds, the sky can be 1,000 times brighter than it would be otherwise. And again, that means about 99% of people in our country cannot see the Milky Way anymore because of that sky glow. The culprits that create this light pollution are pretty easily identified. One is unshielded lighting. Another is, whoops, whoa, how did that happen? Color temperature. Slideshow. Oops. color temperature, and the third one is overlighting. So what do I mean by unshielded lights? Lights that light fixtures that don't have anything to prevent the light from going every which way. There are all kinds of examples of unshielded lights. This one on the bottom left is really popular these days in new subdivisions. I see these lights going up. Somehow they evoke some nostalgia, but they're terrible because the light just goes everywhere and not necessarily where it's intended to be. So all of these are examples of unshielded lights. The lights would be fine if they just had a shield on them. Color temperature. Very prevalent today are the really bright white lights. There's a gradient of lights available, and the very, very bright ones are called cool white. They're on the cool white end of the spectrum. The problem with this is that they're very harsh for our eyes and not good for our health. We'll get into that a little bit more later. The warmer white, like the incandescent lights that we used to always use, are a warmer color temperature, and they are not as harmful. Now this, insert a little thing about, a word about LEDs. LEDs are wonderfully efficient. They're very energy efficient. For some reason, people think an LED has to be white. They do make LED lights in warmer colors. Sometimes you just have to look at when you're in a big box store and there's the lighting department, it's like overwhelming, there's so many lights. But if you look, you can find LEDs that are in a warmer temperature. Overlighting. Well, I guess the classic example of overlighting is Las Vegas. Bogart writes that this the brightest beam of light on Earth is from the Luxor Casino in Las Vegas. So that's probably an extreme, but some cities are not far from this. Well, why? If you ask people why do we have all these lights, you're likely to get a similar answer from a lot of different folks. So a big part of Bogart's book is this why. Well, most people say we have these lights for safety, and we all want to be safe. But Bogart questions, where does this come from? This feeling that lights equal safety, because that's an assumption that is not necessarily true. We're driven by this fear of the dark. We tend to fear things that we don't know, and of course, when you're in a dark environment, you don't always know what's out there. So yes, it can be scary, but do lights always mean more safety? Let's take a look at some examples. Safe or unsafe? The photo on the top, there's a big security light outside this person's house, but it's producing a lot of glare. So you're looking at the house, you see that bright light, but what is behind that fence? The bottom picture shows, there's a guy standing there. You couldn't see him when you're blinded by the glare of that light. It's not that a light there is wrong, it's just not the right light, because it's blinding the person that's wanting to be protected. Another example, this was taken here in the Chicago suburbs. Security lights by a garage. Very bright white and glaring light, and there was somebody in the shadows that you couldn't see. Here's an example, also from the Chicago suburbs. I don't know if it might have been Naperville, I think. Gas stations. You could do open heart surgery in a gas station parking lot. They're so bright. And they're very, very they send out an awful lot of glare. Well, as a driver approaching this intersection, there are some things that you can't see because of those lights. Those 3 circles indicate there's important things that we should be able to see, but we're not. There is a street sign, says Route 83. There's striping on the road, and then there's another street sign that are not visible because of the glare of those lights. So, safe or not safe? The border wall along our southern border has really huge bright spotlights, and some of the guards, I'm not sure if it was Texas or Arizona, but they actually filed a complaint that the lights were preventing them from being able to see. The bright white lights, where they shine you can see, but right next to it, they create really dark shadows that you can move an army through. And is the answer just putting up more and more lights? We maybe want to consider some different options. So lighting is not necessarily bad, but bad lighting can actually decrease safety. The former president of the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, who also is an optometrist, wrote that badly designed street lighting, which is probably 80% of street lighting, are glare sources. They actually reduce the contrast of things you're trying to see rather than increase it. So some things to bear in mind with this whole thing about we need more lights for safety. Most property crime, according to data, occurs during the day. Some crimes, like vandalism and graffiti, actually need outdoor lighting. And the ubiquitous dawn to dusk security lights cast glare in all directions, far beyond the boundaries of the property for which they were meant to provide security. So, as neighborhoods become more and more lit, what's happening is people are getting room darkening shades, blackout shades and so on. Everybody's shades are drawn. Well, who's looking then to see what's happening outside? So you might be putting up all these security lights, but nobody is outside to see who might be doing harm outside your house. So you have to kind of wonder what the reasoning actually is behind it. How many of you have experienced this driving at night? I don't think there's anybody under 20 here with youthful eyes. But as we mature, our eyesight goes through some changes, and it makes it even harder to see when there's glare. And the new headlights on cars, they're all going to the bright white LED, and they're really harmful for our vision. So the technology, just a little something about LED technology, it is perceived, it enters our eyes differently than the old-fashioned technology. And I'm not an optometrist, so I don't understand all those particulars, but what I understand is the LED lights hit our pupils more directly, and those lights almost seem to pierce your eyes if you look at them hard. And according to some optometrists, light pollution is an environmental risk factor in macular degeneration, and artificial lights in general lead to ocular fatigue. And a corollary of this is all the screen time that we have and what a strain that is on our eyes. I do not profess to understand this, but just to show you that this is from an optometrist paper, a recent paper on the effect of light pollution on our eyes. So suffice it to say, there's a lot of research going on to better understand how artificial lights are affecting our vision. Well, let's talk a little bit about nocturnal ecology. A big part of Bogart's book is looking at how darkness affects the ecology in our natural areas and in our cities as well. So what goes on in the dark? Any ideas? What happens in the dark in the natural world? What kinds of activities are going on? Okay, feeding, right? Anything else? What else do critters do at night? What's that? Reproduction, courtship and reproduction. Anything else? Sleep. Okay. Yes? Hunting, feeding, yep. And there's one other thing that KCCNers ought to know about. Migration and pollination. So let's take a look at those. We got hunting, feeding, courtship, reproduction, flowering, pollination, migration, and sleep. So I think we've hit them all here. So how do these animals do this in the dark, and what effect does artificial light have on them? Well, let's have a brief aside about holiday lighting here. Holiday lighting, this is just one example of nocturnal ecology being disrupted. Holiday lighting it shows up actually on satellites. Some of our cities and suburbs are 50% brighter during the holiday times. Now, this is not to be a killjoy. I'm not a Scrooge, a Grinch, or anything like that, but the fact of the matter is that artificial light affects the natural world. Sometimes it affects the natural world that we're trying to protect. There was a recent study done of fox squirrels, eastern fox squirrels, and the effects of holiday lights on these critters. These researchers found that in their study, fox squirrels were active for an additional 2 to 3 hours after their normal time, because it was still daylight. So they were out and about feeding and doing their what was usually daytime activities. However, that meant that they were at an increased risk of predation, because during those hours, owls and feral cats were more active. This is just one example of many different things that are potential and real changes in animal behavior due to artificial lights. Light pollution also has been found to affect the spread of disease. Just one example, a study found that house sparrows in areas that had high light pollution carried higher incidences of West Nile virus by the mosquito. The correlation is somewhat complicated, but that was the result of the study, was actually that the mosquitoes had been infecting these house sparrows at a higher rate in areas with more light pollution. There are scads of research on these kinds of interactions. Now, one big area of light pollution that should concern us all is nocturnal pollinators. Many pollinators are only active at night. So when we go to sleep, we have our vegetable garden out back, there are a lot of animals busy pollinating the flowers in our garden when we're asleep. And if we have a deck light or something that floods our backyard with light, we are affecting the pollination that's going on in our gardens. So the kinds of pollinators that are out at night, moths, can you think of anything else? Bats, that's right, bats. Although most of our bats are insectivores, but in more southern areas, bats pollinate flowers. So if you like tequila, bats are responsible for pollinating the agave plants at night that make tequila. Beetles are pollinators. There are lots of nocturnal beetles. And there are some species of bees that are active just at night. So there's a moth, looks like it's pollinating a 4 o'clock plant. A recent study found that nocturnal visits to plants were reduced by 60% in areas with artificial illumination compared to dark areas. So now we'll move on to courtship and reproduction. This is a time-lapse photograph of fireflies in Minnesota. And who doesn't like fireflies? It's one of the insects that almost universally loved. Well, how do fireflies, well, what do fireflies do that we find so cool? They light up. They blink. And why are they blinking? Courtship, yes, it's all for love. The female firefly hangs out in the grass, on the vegetation on the ground, and she blinks a message. It's like a Morse code, and the males flying around can read her signals, and they can respond to see if she's open, willing, ready, and able, and that's how they make more fireflies. And we've found that in areas with more light pollution, we're seeing fewer fireflies. So if you look at this backyard, for example, there's no way fireflies could see each other. They have to be able to see each other's signals. And with this kind of light, they're not going to be able to do that. I would venture to guess that there are other issues that are detracting fireflies here too, like maybe pesticides for that weedless lawn. So fireflies will not be around in an area like this. Amphibians, another group of animals. It's been found that amphibians detect light levels 100 times dimmer than we do. So prolonged exposure to bright lights can affect their hormones, skin coloration, how they regulate their temperature, and their reproduction. Those little microscopic creatures, the plankton, another example of animal behavior that's affected by light. People seem to love to shine lights on water. The problem is that Many species, and as a group, plankton, are averse to light. They're light averse, and they will swim away from the light. They happen to be the basis of the food chain. So there are a lot of things that will also have to move if the plankton move. So when we light up piers and shorelines, restaurants love to put spotlights out onto the water if they're along, the river or along a lake. But all that does is totally mess up the ecology in the water. Whether it's plankton, fish, or aquatic mammals, it's not what they evolved with. A classic example is sea turtles. Has anybody read about what happens, the effect of lights on sea turtles? The sea turtles will come to shore to lay nest and lay their eggs. Then they need to return to the ocean after they've laid their eggs. And the lights on shore confuse them as to where the ocean is. So a lot of times, sea turtles will not make it back to the ocean because they don't know which direction it is. They've been thrown off by the lights. And the longer they're on land, the more susceptible they are to predation and accidents and poaching and all that kind of stuff. Another part of nocturnal ecology is migration. Bird migration is a huge deal that we often don't realize that it's going on because most bird migration happens at night. Many birds have evolved for a number of reasons to do their long distance flying at night. In the daytime, when we see them in our forest preserves or backyards or whatever, they're fueling up, they're feeding all day long to fuel their flight. And when it gets dark, they're off, they're taken off again. There are some superhighways in the sky at night, and we've referred to them as flyways. There's a major flyway along the Pacific. There's one in the Great Plains. There's one, we're in the Mississippi Flyway, and then on the East Coast, there's the Atlantic Flyway. Millions of birds take these highways at night, and from September through October and April through May are the peak times for that travel. So what happens? No, let me backtrack a little bit. So how do they know where to go if they're flying at night? Has anybody ever heard about some of the adaptations for migration?
Stars?
Exactly. They read a celestial map. They can orient themselves based on their position relative to the constellations and relative to the moon. Well, what happens when there are a lot of bright lights on the ground? They get confused. The stars are no longer up there, but they're down here. And they'll fly off course, expending calories that they really can't afford to waste. And they're susceptible to more predation and so on. I'd like to take a little time to consider the effects of light pollution as seen in New York with the 9/11 tribute in light. This is a great example of what light can do to birds. And Bogart mentions this in his book. There's been a lot of research since his book was published. So every year on September 11th, two beams of light are shown up into the sky from very close to ground zero. And I have not seen it, but apparently it's a very moving tribute to those who lost their lives tragically in that terrorist attack. The problem is that the light draws in birds. It's like they're drawn like a magnet to the light. And once they're in the light, let's see what happens here. I just tried to turn the volume off, but there we go. All those little white things are birds that are sucked into those beams of light, and they're spiraling endlessly in those beams of light. People started to notice this after the tribute was started. First they heard these odd vocalizations. So the birds are up there making sounds that birders had never heard before. They're basically distress calls. And watching these birds, they would fly and fly and fly until they got so exhausted they would fall to the ground. On the ground, they are, again, susceptible to predators in the city, like rats and house cats and stuff like that. But also, if they do, like, wake up, if they're just stunned and they wake up again, they try to fly again, and what's all around them? Big buildings filled with light, and they collide into the windows and the side of the buildings. Well, this, the mortality rate was amazingly high. And there were birders in New York who were like, you know, it's a beautiful tribute. However, we have to think about what the effect is here on birds. Millions of migrating birds are affected every time this light is turned on. And as I mentioned, they're disoriented, they're exhausted, they fall to the ground, and then those that resume flight collide with skyscrapers. Not a good scene. The sidewalks are littered with dead birds in the morning. Fortunately, a compromise has been reached, so ornithologists and Audubon members are on the ground every year during the tribute in light, monitoring the situation. When there is a certain number of birds, when they estimate birds trapped in the lights are turned off for about 20 minutes to a half hour, and those birds are able to kind of reorient themselves and fly again. Then starts all over again. They turn the lights on, the people on the ground count until there's too many, and then they turn the light off again. So it's a compromise. It's not ideal, but closer to home, McCormick Place, you may have heard in the news last year, 2023, in October, in one night, nearly 1,000 birds were killed during peak migration. This was a double whammy. The lights reflecting off the windows and the shiny exterior of the McCormick Place building the birds were just colliding into the building by the thousands. The light reflection and that was right along their flyaway peak migration time, an incredible massacre, basically. So that's one of the victims at McCormick Place. These are just some of the birds that were collected. Thanks to there's a group called the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, and they're out there every morning rescuing, rehabbing what they can, and then just taking data of those that they can't rehab. There's also a program called Lights Out Chicago you might have heard about, and other cities are getting on board with this. It started way back in 1995. It's a voluntary program that encourages owners and managers of the big skyscrapers to turn off or dim their lights, especially during peak migration. So what about plants? We talked a lot about animals. Plants are affected by circadian rhythm too. Our plants need darkness. They need a certain amount of darkness just as much as they need daylight. This is a photo that shows the effect of a street light on a soybean field. So there's the street light, and the plants that were in the light stayed green well past the others, and this kind of thing makes it hard for harvest and things like that, but it just really shows that plants care about light. Light affects plants too. You'll sometimes see trees in parking lots that have more leaves on one side than the other. That's usually the side that has more leaves is the side that's by the street light. So light affects plants by, it gives them a signal as to when to drop their leaves. It affects flowering time and fruit set, which if you own an orchard, that's going to be important for you. If you have a lot of artificial lights, your apple trees may not flower at the right time, therefore they won't be pollinated at the right time. Fruit set may be off kilter and so on. Human health. Well, of course, we always want to know, how is it going to affect me? There are lots of parts of our everyday health that are affected by that circadian rhythm. Natural darkness, natural light. Sleep is one of the main things that we think about. And the American Medical Association stated that it's estimated that white LED lamps have 5 times greater impact on our sleep rhythms than conventional street lamps. And these lights nowadays are getting brighter and brighter with greater impact on our sleep. It's also noted that there are correlations with other things like obesity and there were a few other things. I can't remember what one or the other, but sleep and eating and things like that. So this light trespass I mentioned earlier, that's when light goes where off the property of where it's intended to go, and particularly in cities this is a big problem. Definitely affects people's sleep. Now here's the good news. The light pollution is prevalent, it's growing. However, it's a form of pollution that's completely reversible. And the solutions all save money and energy. So that's a win-win. And Bogart's book really emphasizes that nobody's saying we should not be safe, nobody's saying we shouldn't have lights, we just need the right kind of lights. The shielded lights, the right color of lights, and wise use of lights. In fact, there's an organization called the Dark Sky Association, and they have a really excellent website. They've kind of encapsulated in the principles for lighting into 5 easy to understand statements. First, use light only if it's needed. So is the light useful? It seems that there's a big trend now in neighborhoods that that, oh, my neighbor has these new bright white lights, I guess I should have it. But is it useful? Like, think about, why is this light being put up? So, is it useful? Targeted, directed only where it needs to go. If you want to light your sidewalk between, your driveway and your front door, fine, light your sidewalk. You don't need to light the neighbor's yard as well. You don't need to light the sky or the trees. Light the sidewalk, but direct it where it needs to be. Whoops. And use the right level of light. It doesn't have to be the brightest that's on the market. You can use the level that's necessary. And control. There are motion detectors. It's not high tech. Motion detectors and timers are available. And then the color, as I mentioned, warmer colors are generally better than those very, very cool white bulbs. They even have labels now, just like for nutrition. There are labels on lights that can help you decide which light to get. So brightness and the color are indicated on there. We're used to thinking in watts, but now you'll see more the term lumens. Lumens is somewhat the equivalent of watts, and Kelvin refers to the temperature. So they're trying to make it so that we can at least understand the light that we're buying. So in sum, a naturally dark environment is a vital resource to all living things. Bogart's book is a wonderful eye-opener to this. He writes about not just all this scientific stuff, but the spiritual importance of being able to see a dark sky as well. It's vital to us on many levels. As Bogart wrote, I'm talking about a night sky that leaves you breathless, that makes you want to study the stars, or write poetry, or dance. Vincent van Gogh, his famous Starry Night painting, turns out he loved the night sky, and he said that the stars made him dream. He also wrote in 1888, he wrote a description of a beach in southern France. He said, the deep blue sky was flecked with clouds of a blue deeper than the fundamental blue of intense cobalt, and others of a clearer blue, like the blue whiteness of the Milky Way. In the blue depth, the stars were sparkling, greenish, yellow, white, pink, more brilliant, more sparkling, gem-like than at home. Even in Paris, opals, you might call them, emeralds, rubies, sapphires. If only we could see those stars today. It's important for our children, many of whom have never seen the Milky Way. What happens if they don't have a sense of wonder at things like this? Bogart quotes a lot from an author, Henry Beston, who wrote in the 1920s, "We must learn to reverence the night and to put away the vulgar fear of it. For with the banishment of night from the experience of man, there vanishes as well a religious emotion, a poetic mood, which gives depth to the adventure of humanity." In conclusion, I highly recommend Bogart's book. He has written more since the publication of The End of Night, but I think it's an excellent book to just for an overall look at what light pollution is and what the glory of the night sky can be. If you're interested in more information, the Dark Sky International is a great organization that has a website real easy to navigate website. There's also a group here, which I'm involved in, called Dark Sky Chicago, and you can visit that website as well. Yes, questions, yes?
Yes, at the beginning, you mentioned dawn to dusk lights. And a lot of people don't understand what they are.
The question was, what are dawn to dusk lights? Those are lights that are on a light sensor, and so they can, like during a thunderstorm, if the thunderstorm's at 10 in the morning, they'll go on as well because it reads the level of light. So dawn to dusk lights are the ones like street lights that go on when they detect that it's getting to be nighttime, then they go off when the sun rises. Does that answer your question?
Then they make several bulbs that are dawn to dusk.
Yes, you can find those at the big box stores and stuff. Yeah.
So they are dangerous for all of the stuff that you're talking about.
Are they dangerous to everything? The key is, are they shielded? Are they directed down? And are they the right color of light? They aren't as harmful if they're a warmer light and if they're shielded and if they're not directed up. So lighting buildings at night, whenever a light shines up, that's not a good thing.
Thank you.
Yes?
Well, I know there's a dark sky preserve in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go in, you can't have car lights, and my children go there.
Yes.
Being older, we used to see this Milky Way all the time.
I know, from our backyards, yep. So the comment was that there are dark sky parks. There's actually a growing number of dark sky preserves. South Dakota, Oklahoma. We have a dark sky forest preserve in Cook County, Palos Hills, I believe it is. And it has the dark sky designation. It's not going to be nearly as dark as, New Mexico or whatever. But the lights around that preserve are dark sky friendly lights. And I know the Cook County Forest Preserve District puts on different night programs there. So that's pretty cool. We're trying to get there. Yes.
In nocturnal animal exhibits, they're illuminated with a reddish or a rosy light. Are those recommended?
Yes, red lights are generally not perceived by wildlife, or at least not in a negative way. So, like if we do night hikes and in preserves and natural areas, we usually use use cellophane over the flashlight or whatever, because the red light's not going to be as harmful. Yeah. Yes.
What do they do after that one night at McCormick Place? Did they change the lights or just turn them off? Or?
Good question. What was the result of the McCormick Place debacle? Yes, the powers that be at McCormick Place have agreed to work with ornithologists and so on. They've dimmed the lights, and I think they've put certain anti-reflection film on some of the glass. So they have taken steps to mitigate the harm.
It still happens though, right?
Still happens.
Okay.
Yeah, the Chicago bird collision monitors are active year after year, spring and fall. Yep. All right. I do have some handouts here. Let's see. I'll start some on one side. Yeah. You can start passing those around. All right. Well, when you go home this evening, look at the night sky, enjoy what you can, and do what you can in your own property to be a good steward of the night sky. All right, there are no more questions. We'll conclude here, and thank you very much. Happy holidays.